One of the things we've learned from all the wildfires that we've experienced in California is that it is possible to build a home for the fire, to build in such a way that the home has a better chance of surviving a wildfire. During Lent, we are looking at spiritual practices that can help us individually and communally build for the emotional and spiritual fires that we face these days. I learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs when I was in college a million years ago. And probably in a class I was taking in the education department. One of the core ideas of Maslow's theory is that every person has some basic, important core needs. And these basic needs, these core needs, must be met before you can start pursuing other needs in his hierarchy. Once you have security of things like food and water and shelter, then you can start thinking about higher needs like belonging and things like that. Today, we bring this theory about our needs to our spiritual lives, letting water and wine become metaphors or avatars for our physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. We'll look at how water and wine can help us build for the fire.
The first lesson for today is from the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And from my internet research, it revealed that the symbolic representations of water and wine are for the purpose of believing that nothing is impossible with God. Everything is possible with God. On the third day, there was a wedding in the Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to me and to you? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the person in charge of the banquet." So they took it out. When the person in charge tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the person called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Genesis 21 teaches about God's faithfulness in fulfilling promises, and the importance of trusting in God's timing and the consequences of relying on human efforts rather than divine intervention. Genesis chapter 21, verses 8 through 21. The child, Isaac, grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Do not let me look on the death of the child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt.
There are definitely things that I find troubling about that scripture. I find Sarah's jealousy to be troubling. I find Abraham's willingness to send an enslaved woman and her child out into the wilderness, essentially condemning them to death. I find that very troubling. I even find Hagar's lack of power troubling. The thing I find most troubling, however, is the portrayal of God seeming to go along with this. "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman," God tells Abraham. "Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is also your offspring." Yes, the story of Hagar and Ishmael comes out fine, but it shouldn't take God's intervention at the end of the story. Abraham and Sarah should have treated Hagar and Ishmael better from the beginning. Sarah tells Abraham to cast out this slave woman with her son, and I want Abraham to tell her no. And if Abraham won't say no, I want God to tell Abraham no. The God I know in Jesus takes the side of the oppressed. The God I know in Jesus stands with the enslaved woman. The God I know in Jesus stands with children, all children, regardless of who their mother is. The God I know in Jesus behaves more like the God at the end of the story than the God at the beginning of the story. The God I know hears the cries of the children and cares. The God I know hears the cries of the mothers as well, something missing from this story. Hagar cries out to God, and the angel says that God has heard the cries of the boy, who, according to the story, didn't even cry out. Or at least there's no mention of him crying out. Still, at least at the end of the story, God takes the side of the cast-offs and the cast-outs. The thing that draws me to this story, though, is the water. When Abraham kicks Hagar and Ishmael out, he gives them some bread and a skin of water. It's provision to last a day, maybe. Out in the wilderness, out in the desert, a skin of water will go quickly, and when it's gone, death will not be far behind. I don't know what I would do if I were in Hagar's position. I don't know if I would insist on holding my child as my child died, or if that would be too hard, and I would lay my child down in the shade of a tree and wander away so I didn't have to watch my child die. I suspect I'd hold my child, but who knows? I can understand the decision to walk away knowing that I too would be dying. Water is the gift that saves the day. Water that comes at the end of the story, more precious than food, it is the presence of a well, the presence of a source of water that means survival, not death. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. I mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs in our gathering reflection. I said that the central idea of Maslow's theory is that every person has needs. When depicted as a graphic, this hierarchy is usually done as a triangle or a pyramid. At the base of the triangle are the needs that are most important, most foundational, that must be met to keep the body functioning. These are our basic survival needs: air, water, food, shelter, sleep, warmth. Without these, we die. When these basic physiological needs are met, one can focus on needs that are higher up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs: needs of safety, needs of love and belonging, needs of esteem, needs of self-actualization. As I mentioned, water is one of the basic physiological needs we have. It's not detailed in the story, but Maslow would say that once Hagar found the water, she would need to find food and shelter. And then, once she found food and shelter, she could think about security for herself and for her child. And then she could think about finding a place to belong and a place where they could find love. And apparently she found these things. The story says that God planned to make a great nation through Ishmael, that he grew up and became an expert with a bow, and that Hagar found him a wife that he eventually married. All of us have needs. All of us have basic needs for survival. Our physiological needs need to be met. I think that's why they're called needs. And our needs for a sense of safety need to be met. And not everyone has it. And lately in our country, the sense of safety is particularly under threat. We're all aware of the attacks being launched by the federal government on students from other countries. It's becoming clear that the federal government is targeting people who've entered the country legally and who are studying as they have agreed to do, simply because the current administration doesn't like the political positions they've taken or how they've expressed those positions. Their safety and security as a class of people is under threat. They're being denied access to the very systems that are supposed to be providing that safety and security. And let me make it clear about the wider danger here. The reason every person, regardless of their citizenship status, who's in the United States, needs to be protected, needs to have access to due process, is simply this: it protects these rights of citizens. If non-citizens do not have the same civil rights and access to due process that citizens are supposed to have, all the government has to do is say, "Ooh, Jeff, you're not a citizen," and they can sweep me away because I don't have access to due process because they've said I'm not a citizen, and so I can't prove that I am a citizen. So to protect my rights, everyone in the United States has to have those rights. Of course, international students are not the only group of people who are under threat from the federal government. All immigrants, documented and undocumented, live under threat. We've seen it in the expedited removals of people labeled members of a gang from Venezuela, once again denied due process, where the government would need to prove that they are in fact members of this gang. And the threat extends even to the children of immigrants born in the United States and, according to the 14th Amendment, are citizens. Though temporarily enjoined, on the day he was inaugurated, President Trump signed an executive order attempting to limit this right, and the administration is now seeking review by the Supreme Court of lower court rulings. Transgender and non-binary people are under attack. President Trump has issued at least 5 orders and memos that directly impact the lives of trans people, from attacks on non-discrimination protections in the workplace to attempts to limit access to health care for transgender, non-binary, and intersex individuals, to bans on transgender individuals from serving in the military. These executive actions attempt to undermine the hard-fought progress we have made towards equality and threaten, through the othering, all LGBTQ plus folk. Let's be clear, the othering of minorities makes them more vulnerable to discrimination, to violence, and to death. Transgender folk are the focus of the administration right now, and the more successful they are in demeaning trans folk, the more likely they are to expand their othering to other sexual minorities. The government, my government, is making it harder and harder for international students to find the metaphoric water they need as they wander the desert into which they've been cast. My government is making it harder and harder for immigrants of all statuses to find the metaphoric water that they need as they wander in the desert into which they've been cast. My government is making it harder and harder for LGBTQ plus people to find the metaphoric water they need as they wander in the deserts into which they've been cast. Our government has become Abraham, casting Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness, denying people the most basic of needs: shelter, security, and community. One of the ways we can build for this fire is to make sure that each of us and each of our neighbors has access to water. Meanwhile, Maslow's hierarchy of needs suggests that access to water is not enough. Having our physiological and safety needs met allows us to survive, but to thrive, we need more. And this is where the wine comes in. I know that wine isn't necessarily a helpful metaphor for everyone. People who are in recovery, people who come from families that had alcohol in them. Other people can find the word wine carries a lot of baggage. It works biblically. The story we heard of from John's gospel the wine represents much more than alcoholic beverage. So let me say this. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And I believe that building for the fire can go beyond focusing on our basic needs and the basic needs of our neighbors. Episcopal Bishop Stephen Charleston says it's counterintuitive as it may seem. Let them hear us rejoicing. Even in the midst of a grim struggle, let them hear us rejoicing in our relationship with the Spirit, rejoicing in our relationship with the beauty of Mother Earth, rejoicing in our relationship with one another. Even in conflict, we sing our song, rejoicing in those that join us every day. I have a friend who loves to craft. And starting a few months ago, as an act of self-care, she decided that she was going to set aside one day a month to crafting. And she's finding it so rewarding and nurturing that she's decided she's going to move towards one day a week. A crafting Sabbath is what I've called it. That's how she's building for the fire. Not just making sure she has the water she needs, but finding in this act of crafting the wine that she needs to thrive. Seeking and making beauty, seeking and making joy, seeking and giving love help us build for the fire. We are fashioned for a purpose, Bishop Charleston says. We have felt that for a very long time. But we did not know what that purpose was. Now we do. Our purpose is to protect human dignity and to defend human diversity. Our purpose is to rescue Mother Earth as first responders to her suffering. Our purpose is to preserve freedom and to persist in justice. We are fashioned for a purpose. Now we know. Water and wine. Amen.